One of the reasons that I love genetics so much is because I find it so interesting to learn about how traits, our characteristics, like my brown hair, are passed from one generation to the next. But for a lot of human history, we didn't know anything about how that happened. Now we take it for granted that we know about DNA. But for thousands of years, people didn't know about DNA or anything like that. So, I thought it would be interesting to travel back in time to the 1800s and see what people thought about where traits come from, about how they're passed down. Let's do it. All right, I've found someone here to ask. Hello, ma'am. I was wondering, could you tell me, how are traits passed down from one generation to the next? That's a silly question. Kids just look like their parents. I don't have time to think about things like these. I've got sweaters to knit. All right, I found someone else, so let's ask her. Hello, ma'am. Could you tell me, how are traits passed down from one generation to the next? Well, I heard that there's a tiny person already formed in the sperm, and then the egg just gives them nutrients so that they grow into an even bigger person. But if it works like that, why don't kids just look like their dad? Well, I don't know how. You just asked me what I had heard, and that's what I've heard, okay? Well, good thing for a man named Gregor Mendel. He's actually often called the father of modern genetics because he did a number of experiments that taught us some more about how traits are passed down. You see, he was growing pea plants. He was a monk in a monastery. And pea plants have lots of traits that can vary. For example, peas can be green or yellow. They can be smooth or wrinkled. Their flowers can be purple or white. And so he did experiments on those pea plants to figure out how those traits were passed from one generation to the next. So Mendel found that when he crossed a white pea plant with a purple pea plant, all the offspring were purple. So where did that white trait go? But then something even stranger happened, because when he took these purple plants in this first generation of offspring and he allowed them to self-fertilize or pollinate themselves, then most of their offspring was purple, but some of their offspring was white. And it was a fairly predictable amount. There was about 75% of them that were purple and 25% that were white. So from this purple plant, they did not have all purple offspring. His first conclusion was that an individual's traits are determined by these factors that are passed down from one generation to the next generation. Now we, today, would call these factors genes. Okay, we learned that word last week. So these are what are passed down from the parental generation to the offspring. We don't just randomly end up with our traits, they're passed down to us. His second conclusion was that there are different forms of a gene, which we would now call alleles. And so in this case, we're looking at the flower color gene, and so the two alleles for that would be a purple, struggling here, and white allele. Okay, so if you remember, we talked about these homologous pairs of chromosomes that have the same genes on them. So organisms have these pairs, peas have homologous pairs, we have homologous pairs, which have the same genes on them. So maybe the flower color gene is right here at this locus, but they could have a different allele, okay? This one could have the purple allele on it from mom and the white allele on it from dad for the flower color. Or they could have the same allele, but these alleles are different forms of the same flower color gene. The next conclusion is called the principle of dominance. And so this is the idea that one allele is dominant over the other. So in this case, our purple allele is dominant. And that's why in the second generation, when he crossed the purple and the white plants, there was only purple offspring because they each got a purple allele and a white allele, but the purple is dominant. So it effectively hides that white allele. We only see the purple. The allele that's not dominant, we call recessive. So the white is recessive, which means that it is not the dominant allele. Why do we only get one allele from each parent? Or why did these pea plants only get one allele from each parent? How does that work if each parent has two alleles? So think about it like this. Here is a homologous pair of chromosomes, okay? They have their alleles for this flower color gene here, okay? Two alleles. Then these chromosomes are copied during S phase, and that's how we get these sister chromatids, okay? But these are copies. So now they would have that gene here as well. And then meiosis happens to make the gametes. So remember, in the first round of meiosis, our homologous pairs are separated. So we'd have one over here, one over here. And then in meiosis, it divides again, right? There's 2 rounds of division. And in the second round of division, those sister chromatids are separated. So here we are now. We have only one of these chromosomes is going to go into each gamete. So that's how parents only pass down one allele for a gene instead of both of their alleles. Well, that's all for this week. I hope you guys have a better appreciation of all that it took to get to how much we know today.